Hi everyone. I have seen a few questions about how to quote, and this is the in-text method. Of course, the other citation method is to make a list, a works cited page that should be a separate page from the rest of your paper, but this is how you quote in the text of your paper. So this is from the PCC Writing Center. It's a graphic that really is effective. It helps people kind of remember. So think of it as a sandwich. So let's make a quote sandwich. First of all, you want to introduce your quote. Make sure that the reader knows who's speaking or writing. So, for example, as Kermit the Frog points out. Okay, so think of the name of the author. Typically, you mention the name of the author in your first paragraph if you're writing about a single work, right? So, for example, you might start your paper with, in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then from there on out, you can just use her last name. But if you've never mentioned the author before, use the first and last name. And then every subsequent mention, use the last name. Right? Okay, so as Kermit the Frog points out, Kermit the Frog profoundly states, as described by Kermit the Frog, try to use a variety of introductory phrases rather than just saying Shelley says, Shelley says, Shelley says, right? Kermit the Frog maintains, according to Kermit the Frog. So think about the tone of the writing too. Is this author arguing? Is the author claiming or just observing what's going on with the quote? All right, and then after you have your phrase and you use a comma after it, you're going to put in the quotation. Word for word, spelled exactly the way that it's spelled in the author's text. So be careful with typos and leaving words out and things like that. If you want to leave some words out without changing the apparent meaning of the text, be careful not to do that. You can use the ellipsis, the 3 dots. And if you need to change one of the words so that it's clearer to the reader, because you are taking it out of the text it's surrounded with, the context. So if it's kind of unclear, there's like a weird pronoun in there, something that isn't clear to the reader, you can use brackets. They look like staples, kind of. They're like the square parentheses, so squared off. And put those around the word that you change. Okay, so that way your reader knows, oh, okay, this is what's happening in this quote. So you notice the quotation marks happen here, then the page number. You don't have to write Shelley or Frog or anything in here unless you haven't, for some reason, mentioned it in your intro phrase. Okay? All you need is a page number. If it's a web source and there is no page number available, just leave this part out. But I've seen a lot of like chapter, section, those aren't necessary to place in the parenthetical citation. All right, and then your punctuation comes last. So however you're finishing this sentence, probably with a period. Right? So this is the order. Then you need to analyze your quote and relate it to your point. So, why'd you put this quote in here? I've seen a few quotes cited that seem like they're really interesting. They're great quotes, but I don't know why the quote is in there, right? The author's very busy moving to the next point or quickly adds another quote. Careful with that too. You don't want your paragraph to get taken over by another author. So 1 or 2 quotes per paragraph, great. Even if you're not quoting directly, but you're using someone else's idea, still cite it, right? You just don't need the quotation marks. But be careful with letting other authors take over your work. I don't want like a collection of quotations. I want some quotations that really support your idea. And I'm not sure how you're connecting the quotation to your idea unless you do some interpretation. So it's not easy being green. Who knew that there were so many ways to interpret that, right? So judging from his peeling skin, we can see that Kermit is right. The depletion of the ozone makes life difficult for not only humans, but green animals as well. All right, so this is like a conservationist interpretation, or a, I don't know, bioethics or biological. So this is one interpretation of the quote. Thus we can see that even a famous frog suffers from the color of his skin. Interesting. So now we're talking about like prejudice or lookism or stereotyping based upon appearances. Sadly, Kermit isn't always the happy frog he appears to be on TV. Okay, so now we're talking about a more psychological approach, right? And then once again, like a social problem. Here, Kermit is referring to the prejudice our society has against green creatures. Okay, so here you notice that each of these discussions is much longer than the quote, right? So I've also seen some interpretations that are just a few brief words after a long quote. So make sure, again, your words take up the majority of the paragraph and that you're really digging into the quote and exploring it in depth. Why did the author write that? How does that support your argument? So this file will be available to you on Canvas, but I just wanted to point this out and make sure that you know what to do when you're citing. All right.